What kind of ruler would torch his own land, burning villages, poisoning wells, and destroying food just to starve, confuse, and break the spirit of an invading army? In the spring of 1462, Mehmed II, Sultan of the Ottoman Empire and conqueror of Constantinople, launched a massive campaign into Wallachia to crush its defiant leader. Vlad III, Vivo of Wallachia, better remembered as Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler. But the Sultan's legions didn't march into a battlefield. They marched into a wasteland. According to chroniclers, like the Byzantine historian Linikos Chalcondyles, Vlad ordered everything in the Ottomans' path to be obliterated. Crops were torched, granaries emptied, villages reduced to ash. Wells were poisoned, livestock slaughtered or driven far away. Even his own people were evacuated or eradicated, so that not a soul remained to offer the enemy shelter, food, or intelligence. This wasn't mindless cruelty. It was calculated survival. Vlad's army was far too small to face men's estimated 90,000, troops hidden. So, he turned the land itself into his deadliest weapon. In a 1462 letter to Matthias Corvinus of Hungary, still preserved in the Hungarian National Archives, Vlad described his campaign in chilling detail. "I have killed peasants, men and women, old and young. We have burned down everything." There is no remorse in his words, only strategy. The results were devastating. The Ottoman troops, unfamiliar with the terrain, soon fell victim to hunger, disease, and fear. Morale shattered, desertion spread, the army's strength drained away, not through glorious battle, but through slow, grinding misery. This was not the war the Ottomans were prepared for. It was annihilation without a fight. It was only the beginning. The captives were brought in by the dozens. Ottoman soldiers who had been caught in skirmishes, Wallachian traitors who had dared to assist the enemy, and common criminals who had broken Vlad's iron laws. They were bound, terrified, and surrounded by men who knew exactly what was about to happen. Vlad gave no speeches. There were no long trials. His orders were simple and cold. Prepare them. The stakes had been planted firmly into the ground days earlier. Each was carved from thick, living wood, its fibers still green, able to bend slightly without breaking. They stood anywhere from 8 to 20 feet high, towering like bare trees in a dead forest. Their tips were tapered into blunt points, not razor-sharp, to ensure the stake would slide into flesh slowly, tearing rather than slicing. A sharp stake killed too quickly. Vlad wanted agony measured in hours, even days. The process was gruesomely methodical. First, the victim's hands were bound tightly behind their back. Soldiers forced the prisoner to the ground or lifted them onto wooden scaffolds beside the stakes. Two executioners held the victim's legs apart, while a third positioned the base of the stake against the lower body, often at the anus or for women, sometimes through the genitals. Then came the slow, deliberate push. The human body is resistant, but gravity and force did their work. The stake pierced through muscle and organs, avoiding the heart and lungs, so death would not come swiftly. The wood scraped against bone, tore through soft tissue, and emerged from the victim's chest, shoulder, or even mouth. There was no mercy. Once impaled, the victim was hoisted upright or left to slide down by their own weight, the stake holding them in a grotesque parody of life. Some died within minutes from shock or blood loss. Others lingered for hours, even days. Eyewitnesses claimed to have seen birds nesting in the hair of the still living, pecking at their faces while they moaned in agony. Vlad didn't stop at a few dozen executions. He ordered thousands. The stakes multiplied until the road to Targovus became an open-air graveyard. A pale, apported bodies, swaying in the wind. By the time the work was done, the forest stretched for miles. The air was thick with the stench of blood, rot, and waste. The sound of the dying low moans, wet gurgles, the rattling of lungs haunted the fields, and this was no hidden atrocity. This was a stage. Vlad wanted the Ottomans to see it. He wanted them to smell it, to feel it in their stomachs, to understand that Wallachia was not a land that could be conquered without paying the highest. The price in human terror was in every sense a weapon made of flesh and fear, and it was waiting for the Sultan himself. The summer sun beat down on me, to advancing army as they neared target. The men were already worn thin from weeks of hunger, thirst, and disease. But nothing, no hardship, no battle, could have prepared them for what lay ahead. At first it was the smell, a sickening stench that rolled over the fields and hung in the air like a living thing. It was the unmistakable odor of death, thick, sweet, and rotting. Flies swarmed in black clouds. Horses became restless, snorting and stamping, as if the very ground were cursed. Then shapes began to emerge on the horizon. At first the soldiers thought they were trees, but as the distance closed, the trees took on human shapes, limbs twisted, heads ling, faces frozen in masks of agony. The forest of the impaled had come into view. 20,000 men, women and children, Ottoman prisoners, Wallachia rebels, and the unfortunate caught in between stood frozen in death upon towering stakes. Their bodies, stripped or half-clawed, had been arranged in deliberate, horrifying order along both sides of the road, leading directly toward the capital. Some had been impaled weeks earlier, their flesh, already blackened and dried like parchment. Others were fresher, their skin bloated in the heat, eyes glassy and open, mouths locked in silent screams, and among them, a few still lived. They twitched faintly, their breaths ragged, their voices reduced to hoarse-wet groans. The sight was enough to make hardened warriors gag, some turning away to retch in the dust. By the time Me Too reached the front ranks of his army, the Sultan's horse was snorting an alarm. The scale of the massacre was beyond comprehension, stretching for miles, a macabre welcome from Vlad Tepes himself. Chroniclers later claimed that M sat in silence for a long time surveying the scene. For all his victories, Constantinople, Serbia, Bosnia, never had he faced a ruler so utterly devoted to terror as a weapon. The message was clear. In Wallachia, the living would envy the dead, and for the Ottoman army, morale shattered instantly. Men muttered prayers under their breath. Some slipped away at night, deserting before they met the same fate. Even the Sultan, unshakable in battle, reportedly, chose to withdraw from Targovus soon after, avoiding a direct confrontation with the man who had turned cruelty into an art form. Vlad had not defeated the Ottomans with numbers. He had defeated them with horror. Large iron cauldrons were filled with water or sometimes wine, and fires were stoked beneath them until the liquid began to roil. Prisoners, traitors, thieves, or enemy spies were stripped and forced inside. Slowly, flesh blistered, split, and peeled away. The process could last an hour or more, the screams echoing across the villages as a warning to anyone considering betrayal for crimes Vlad deemed unforgivable, such as treachery from his own ranks. Death came by flame. Executioners would carefully cut into the skin at the back or chest and peel it away in strips, sometimes leaving the victim alive long enough to see their own flesh discarded. Petty crimes were met with swift, brutal disfigurement. Hands were cut off for theft, noses and ears for lying or slander, eyes for spying. These punishments left the offender alive, but marked forever a walking reminder of Vlad's reach. For those he wished to punish slowly, Vlad would have their eyes gouged out before leaving them. Deep in the forests or mountains where starvation or wild beasts would finish what he had begun, even nobles were not spared. One Ottoman envoy sent to deliver a message refused to remove his turban in Vlad's presence, citing religious custom. Vlad responded by having the turban nailed directly into the man's skull. To Vlad, the law was simple. Fear was the root of order, and mercy was the seed of chaos. His reign was so infamous that traveling merchants told stories of gold coins left on the roadside in Wallachia, untouched for months. Not because people were honest, but because they were afraid of what would happen if they weren't. Under Vlad Tepes, crime did not just decrease. It vanished, swallowed whole by a climate of absolute terror. But every act of cruelty, every execution, every mutilation was also building something else. A legend so black that it would outlive him for centuries.